In the pre-dawn darkness of a Nebraska winter, veteran trucker Ray Hollister pulled his 18-wheeler into the nearly empty truck stop off I-80. After 14 hours on the road, the isolation of the highway had seeped into his bones, but he needed to make his delivery in Denver by noon the next day. The forecast warned of heavy snow, so he'd pushed harder than usual, hoping to outrun the storm. The truck stop was unusually quiet for a Thursday night. Only 2 other rigs were parked in the sprawling lot, both dark and silent. Ray rubbed his tired eyes and decided to grab coffee before catching a few hours of sleep in his cab. As he stepped down from his truck, the bitter cold hit him like a physical blow. The parking lot lights flickered overhead, casting strange, elongated shadows across the asphalt. Inside, the fluorescent lights hummed loudly in the empty cafe. A middle-aged waitress named Darlene, according to her name tag, stood behind the counter, her face expressionless as she poured him coffee without being asked. "You're the third tonight," she said, her voice flat. All looking the same, exhausted, in a hurry. The other 2 left already, couldn't wait out the storm. Ray nodded absently, warming his hands around the mug. "Storm's that bad, huh? Weather Channel says it's the worst in 30 years. Highway patrol's closing I-80 west of here in an hour. You'll be stuck here till morning at least." She slid a menu toward him. "Better eat something. Kitchen closes in 10. Ray ordered a quick meal and listened to the wind rising outside. His delivery deadline pressed on his mind, but he knew better than to challenge a Nebraska blizzard. As he ate, the lights flickered again, and Darlene glanced nervously at the ceiling. "Power's been doing that all night," she explained. "Generator's old. Owner keeps saying he'll replace it." She leaned closer across the counter. "Listen, I don't normally say this to customers, but if I were you, I'd find somewhere else to sleep tonight." Ray stopped mid-bite. "What do you mean?" Darlene looked around, although they were completely alone. "This place has a history, especially in winter." She hesitated. "There was an incident here, back in '97. A trucker got stranded in a storm like this. By morning, they found his rig still running, but he was gone. 2 weeks later, they found what was left of him 5 miles away in a field. Official report said he got disoriented in the blizzard, but..." She trailed off. "But what?" Ray asked, suddenly less hungry. "But he wasn't the first, or the last." She straightened up and wiped the counter. "Just saying. The roads might be dangerous, but sometimes staying put is worse." Ray finished his meal quickly, unsettled by Darlene's warning, but also dismissing it as local folklore. He paid his bill and headed back to his truck. The snow was falling heavily now, swirling in the harsh parking lot lights. The wind screamed between the buildings, sounding almost like a human voice. Inside his cab, Ray turned up the heater and settled into his bunk. Despite his exhaustion, sleep eluded him. The wind rocked his truck, and ice crystals tapped against his windows like impatient fingers. Around 2 a.m., he was startled fully awake by the sound of his CB radio crackling to life. Static filled the cab, then a voice emerged, distorted and faint. "Mile marker 152. Help. They're not letting me leave." Ray sat up, fully alert now. Mile marker 152 was exactly where he was parked. He grabbed the microphone. "This is Ray Hollister at the I-80 truck stop, mile marker 152. Who's calling for help? Over." Nothing but static answered him. Then, the voice returned, clearer this time. "They come when you sleep. They're hungry. Always hungry." A chill that had nothing to do with the weather ran down Ray's spine. He peered through his frosted windshield at the other trucks in the lot. Both were still dark, seemingly unoccupied. He hesitated, then pulled on his heavy coat. Something wasn't right, and if another driver was in trouble, he couldn't just ignore it. The moment Ray stepped out of his truck, he knew he'd made a mistake. The storm had intensified into a whiteout, and the wind cut through his coat like it wasn't there. He could barely see the cafe 20 yards away. He pulled his flashlight from his pocket and called out, but his voice was swallowed by the howling wind. As Ray struggled toward the cafe, his flashlight beam caught movement between the parked trucks. A figure, hunched and shuffling, moved against the driving snow. Ray called out again, but the figure didn't respond. Instead, it seemed to dissolve into the blizzard. Ray reached the cafe door, finding it locked. Through the frosted glass, he could see that all the lights were off. He pounded on the door, but no one came. Where was Darlene? The place had been open less than 2 hours ago. He cupped his hands against the glass and peered inside. In the dim glow of a single emergency light, he could see chairs upturned on tables and no sign of life. Turning back toward his truck, Ray's blood froze. 3 sets of footprints led from where the other trucks had been parked, trucks that were no longer there, straight to his rig. But no footprints led away. Ray's heart hammered in his chest as he started trudging back to his truck, the snow already filling in his own tracks. The wind seemed to carry whispers now, unintelligible words that slithered into his ears. His truck loomed ahead, a dark silhouette in the swirling white. As he got closer, Ray saw that his driver's side door was open, swinging slightly in the wind. He was certain he'd closed and locked it. His hand went to the small pocket knife he always carried. Inadequate protection against whatever might be waiting, but better than nothing. Ray approached cautiously, flashlight beam darting around the cab interior. Empty. He climbed up quickly and slammed the door, locking it immediately. His hands shook as he tried to start the engine. Nothing happened. The battery was dead. Panic rising, Ray grabbed his phone. No signal. He reached for the CB radio to make an emergency call, only to find it dead as well. Everything electronic in his truck had failed simultaneously. He was trapped in a metal box in the middle of a blizzard, completely cut off from the outside world. A soft thump on the roof of his cab made him freeze. Then another. Footsteps moving slowly across the top of his truck. Ray held his breath, knife clutched tightly in his hand. The footsteps stopped directly above his head. Then came the scratching. Slow, deliberate, like long fingernails dragging across metal. Ray stared upward, watching in horror as the roof of his cab began to dent inward, something pressing down with impossible strength. A crack appeared in his windshield, spreading like a spiderweb across the glass. Cold air whistled through, carrying snowflakes and that same whispering voice he'd heard in the wind. But now he could understand the words. "We've been waiting for you, Ray. So long on the road alone. But you're not alone anymore." The windshield shattered inward, and the blizzard rushed into the cab. With it came dark, emaciated figures, their skin pale as the snow, eyes reflecting the dim light like animals. Their mouths, too wide, filled with too many teeth, stretched into hungry smiles. Ray Hollister's truck was found 3 days later when the highway reopened, the blizzard finally spent. The cab was empty, the windshield broken, the interior filled with snow. Ray himself was discovered 2 weeks later by a farmer, 5 miles away in an open field. The official report cited disorientation in the blizzard and hypothermia as the cause of death. Highway Patrol Officer Mac Jennings, first on the scene, never included in his report the strange deep scratches on the truck's roof, or the fact that Ray's CB radio was set to a frequency that had been out of use since 1997. He also never mentioned that when they found Ray's body, his expression was fixed in a rictus of terror, and his eyes, according to the medical examiner, who later quit his job and moved to Florida, had turned completely white, like he'd been staring at something no man should ever have to see. To this day, truckers along I-80 in Nebraska give that particular stop a wide berth, especially in winter. They share the story of Ray Hollister on their CBs as a warning. Some say that during blizzards, if you tune to the old emergency frequency, you can still hear Ray's voice, crackling through the static. They come when you sleep. They're hungry, always hungry. On May 17, 2011, long-haul trucker John Lawson departed from Birmingham, Alabama, with a full load of industrial cleaning supplies, bound for a distribution center in Phoenix, Arizona. The 43-year-old veteran driver had made this cross-country route dozens of times during his 15 years with Southern Cross Logistics. Known for his reliability, Lawson had an impeccable safety record and was meticulous about maintaining his schedule and communication protocols. The journey began routinely enough. Lawson checked in with dispatch as he crossed into Mississippi, noting only light traffic and clear weather. His last scheduled communication came as he passed through Little Rock, Arkansas, where he confirmed he would make his overnight rest stop at the Blue Mesa Truck Plaza just east of Oklahoma City, as he had done on previous runs. When Lawson failed to check in the following morning, his dispatcher, Marla Winters, wasn't immediately concerned. Cell coverage was spotty in parts of western Oklahoma, and drivers occasionally missed check-ins when signals dropped. By noon, however, the GPS tracker on Lawson's truck still showed him at the Blue Mesa Truck Plaza, 12 hours after his arrival, and 4 hours past his scheduled departure time. Winters made several attempts to reach Lawson by cell phone and CB radio, all unsuccessful. Following company protocol, she contacted the truck plaza. The manager, Bill Haskell, agreed to check the parking lot. His call back 15 minutes later marked the beginning of a mystery that remains unsolved to this day. "His truck is here, right where he would have parked it," Haskell reported. "Engine's cold, no sign of the driver. Doors locked, but his logbook and cell phone are still inside. It's like he just vanished." Local police were called to investigate. Officer Dwayne Mercer arrived at the scene and documented several unusual findings. The truck was indeed locked, with Lawson's personal belongings, including his wallet, cell phone, and logbook, still inside the cab. The last entry in the logbook, made at 9:42 p.m. the previous evening, simply read, "Arrived Blue Mesa. Something not right here." Security camera footage added to the growing concerns. Video showed Lawson's truck pulling into the plaza at 9:38 p.m. 4 minutes later, corresponding with his logbook entry, Lawson emerged from his cab and stood beside his truck, appearing to scan the parking lot. He then walked toward the main building, but stopped suddenly about halfway there. The footage showed him turning sharply to his left, staring into a dark area of the lot, not covered by security cameras. After approximately 20 seconds, Lawson abruptly changed direction and walked with purpose toward that dark area. He never reappeared on any of the truck plaza's security cameras. The investigation intensified as Oklahoma State Police became involved. Detective Sarah Reeves took charge of the case and ordered a thorough search of the truck plaza and surrounding areas. Cadaver dogs found no evidence of human remains. Lawson's blood pressure medication was found in his truck, suggesting he hadn't planned to be gone long. His banking records showed no activity after his disappearance. His cell phone had not been used since a call to his wife at 8:14 p.m. that evening, while he was still on the road. What investigators found particularly disturbing were the accounts from other drivers who had been at the Blue Mesa Truck Plaza that night. 3 different truckers reported unusual experiences in the hours before and after Lawson's disappearance. Kevin Brantley, who had parked 2 spaces away from Lawson, told detectives he had seen unusual lights in the wooded area behind the truck plaza around 9:30 p.m. "Not like headlights or flashlights," Brantley stated in his official report. "More like blue-white pulses. I figured it was electrical work maybe, but it gave me the creeps. I locked my doors and pulled my curtains." Another driver, Maria Fuentes, reported hearing a sound like metal being torn around 10:00 p.m., approximately 15 minutes after Lawson was last seen on camera. "I looked out my window, but couldn't see anything," she told investigators. "The weird thing was, all the dogs at the plaza started howling at once. I've been driving for 12 years and never heard anything like it." Perhaps most unsettling was the account from veteran driver Paul Davenport, who had been parked in the space directly next to Lawson. "I was half asleep when I heard someone outside my truck," Davenport reported. "I thought it was someone trying to break in, so I grabbed my flashlight and looked out. There was a man standing between my truck and the next one over, just staring up at the other driver's window. When I shined my light on him, he turned toward me, but Davenport had paused here in his statement, visibly uncomfortable. When pressed by Detective Reeves, Davenport continued. His face wasn't right. It was too smooth, like a mannequin, but wet-looking. The eyes reflected my flashlight like an animal's. I dropped my light, and by the time I picked it up, he was gone. The investigation expanded to consider multiple possibilities. A medical emergency seemed unlikely, as no John Doe patients matching Lawson's description had been admitted to any hospital within a 100-mile radius. Criminal activity was considered, but Lawson had no known enemies, no substantial debts, and no involvement in any illegal activities, according to thorough background checks. The possibility of voluntary disappearance was largely dismissed, based on Lawson's strong family ties, financial stability, and the fact that he had left all his personal belongings behind. 5 days into the investigation, another piece of evidence emerged when Detective Reeves discovered that Lawson had made a brief phone call at 9:40 p.m., just before his last logbook entry. The call was to another trucker, Raymond Wilson, a longtime friend. Wilson was tracked down at a delivery point in Kansas City. "John called me that night, sounding strange," Wilson confirmed. "He asked if I remembered the stories his grandfather used to tell about highway people. I said sure. All the old-timers had stories about phantom hitchhikers and such. He got real quiet, then said, 'I think I'm looking at one right now. They're real, Ray.' Then the call cut off. I tried calling back but got no answer. I figured he was tired and seeing things. Truckers get road hypnosis sometimes." The reference to highway people prompted investigators to interview Lawson's family about these stories. His widow, Ellen Lawson, explained that John's grandfather had been a trucker in the 1950s and 60s and often told stories about supernatural beings that preyed on isolated drivers. "It was just old folklore," Ellen insisted. "John never took those stories seriously. He used to laugh about his grandfather's superstitions." The case grew colder as weeks passed. Searches extending 5 miles in every direction from the truck plaza yielded nothing. Lawson's dental records and DNA were entered into national databases for unidentified remains, without results. 8 months after the disappearance, the Oklahoma State Police classified the case as inactive, though technically still open. Then, on the 1-year anniversary of Lawson's disappearance, a maintenance worker clearing trash from the wooded area behind the Blue Mesa Truck Plaza made a disturbing discovery. Wedged high in the fork of a tree, approximately 15 feet off the ground, was Lawson's distinctive trucker cap, a red meshback hat with a Southern Cross Logistics patch. The hat showed no weather damage, despite having been exposed to the elements for a year. More disturbingly, the inside band of the hat contained a series of marks that the crime lab later confirmed were made by human fingernails, as if the hat had been forcefully ripped from Lawson's head while he was desperately trying to hold on to it. This discovery prompted a renewed search of the area, but no further evidence was found. To this day, John Lawson's disappearance remains unsolved. His truck, returned to Southern Cross Logistics, was eventually sold to another company. Multiple drivers refused to operate the vehicle, reporting strange electrical malfunctions and unexplained cold spots in the cab. The Blue Mesa Truck Plaza has since been renovated and renamed, but many truckers still avoid staying there overnight. Those who know the story of John Lawson maintain a tradition of leaving their exterior lights on when parked there, a small gesture of solidarity for a fellow driver who vanished into the darkness, adding another chapter to the folklore of America's lonely highways. As Detective Reeves, now retired, noted in her final report, "In my 30 years of law enforcement, I've never encountered a case with fewer answers. People don't simply vanish without a trace, except it seems when they do." In the early hours of September 12, 2018, veteran trucker Marcus Wheeler pulled his Kenworth T680 into a roadside rest area along a remote stretch of Highway 95 in northern Nevada. The 47-year-old driver from Tulsa, Oklahoma, was making his regular cross-country haul, transporting automotive parts from Detroit to Sacramento. According to his electronic logging device, Wheeler had been driving for just under his legal limit of 11 hours and stopped to comply with mandatory rest regulations. Wheeler's truck was equipped with modern tracking technology, including GPS and an advanced telematics system that transmitted regular updates to his employer, Continental Transport Services. The system recorded Wheeler arriving at the rest stop at 2:17 a.m. and powering down his engine at 2:19 a.m. What happened in the hours that followed would become one of the most perplexing missing persons cases in recent Nevada history. The first indication that something was amiss came at 2:30 p.m. the following day, when Wheeler failed to check in with dispatch for his scheduled departure. Continental Transport's safety protocol required drivers to confirm their status before resuming their routes. After several unsuccessful attempts to reach Wheeler by phone, dispatch supervisor Elaine Mercer contacted the Nevada Highway Patrol to request a welfare check. Trooper James Callahan arrived at the rest area at approximately 4:15 p.m. He located Wheeler's truck exactly where the GPS coordinates had placed it. The vehicle was locked, with no signs of forced entry or struggle. Wheeler's logbook showed a final entry at 2:25 a.m., noting simply, "Rest stop. Will resume at 1400. His personal effects, including his wallet containing $342 in cash, his cell phone, and a half-eaten sandwich, were found undisturbed in the cab. His keys were missing. The scene was unusual from the start, Trooper Callahan later stated in his official report. There was no indication of a struggle, no blood evidence, no sign of robbery. It appeared as though the driver had simply stepped out of his vehicle and vanished. The rest area where Wheeler disappeared was particularly isolated, situated in a desolate stretch of highway, with the nearest town, Winnemucca, more than 50 miles away. The location had no security cameras or permanent staff. 3 other trucks had been parked at the rest area that night, according to the log sheet maintained by the Department of Transportation. Investigators tracked down and interviewed all 3 drivers. Their accounts added strange details to the already puzzling case. Loretta Jenkins, driving for a refrigerated goods company, reported parking at the rest area from approximately 1:00 a.m. to 5:00 a.m. I remember the Kenworth pulling in because his light swept across my cab and woke me up, Jenkins told investigators. Nothing seemed unusual, but around 3:00 a.m., I woke up again because my dog was going crazy, barking and scratching at my door. I looked out, but couldn't see anything. The night was unusually dark because of cloud cover, no moon or stars. The only thing I noticed was that there weren't any lights on in the other trucks, including the Kenworth, which I thought was strange since he'd just arrived an hour earlier. Another driver, Hector Ramirez, provided a more troubling account. I was having trouble sleeping and was sitting in my cab drinking coffee around 3:15 a.m. when I saw a flashlight beam moving across the parking area. It looked like it was coming from the direction of the bathrooms and heading toward the trucks. The light disappeared near Wheeler's truck. About 10 minutes later, I heard what sounded like metal grinding against metal. Not loud, but distinct. I assumed someone was having mechanical issues. I dozed off after that and left the rest area around 6:00 a.m. Wheeler's truck was still there, but I didn't see any sign of the driver. The third driver, Martin Frazier, had departed the rest area at 11:30 p.m. the previous night, before Wheeler arrived, but provided investigators with unusual information about the location itself. That particular rest area has a bad reputation among truckers, Frazier explained. There's been talk for years about strange experiences there. Electronic failures, unusual sounds, feelings of being watched. Most veteran drivers avoid stopping there after dark if they can. I only stopped to use the restroom and wouldn't have stayed the night there. The Nevada Highway Patrol launched a comprehensive search operation covering a 5-mile radius from the rest area. Cadaver dogs, helicopters equipped with thermal imaging, and dozens of officers on foot found no trace of Wheeler. The absence of any footprints leading away from the rest area particularly puzzled investigators, as the surrounding terrain consisted mainly of fine desert sand that should have preserved tracks. DNA analysis of Wheeler's truck revealed another anomaly. A series of fingerprints found on the passenger side door handle did not match Wheeler or any individual in the criminal database. More disturbing was the discovery of an unidentified substance on the driver's seat, a clear, viscous fluid that forensic analysts could not immediately identify. It contained no human DNA or common biological markers, but had properties similar to industrial silicone. In my 23 years with the Highway Patrol, I've never encountered a substance quite like it, stated forensic specialist Dana Holloway. It resembled silicone sealant, but contained organic compounds that don't match any known commercial product. The investigation took an even stranger turn when investigators recovered data from Wheeler's cell phone. The device's last activity was at 2:58 a.m., a 40-second voice recording that Wheeler apparently made, but never sent to anyone. The audio quality was poor, with significant static interference, but Wheeler's voice was recognizable. In the recording, Wheeler speaks in a hushed, urgent tone. "There's something out there watching the trucks. Keeps circling around, staying just at the edge of where I can see. Not animal, not human either. I'm going to lock up and..." The recording ends abruptly with a sound that audio experts described as a rapid frequency shift across multiple bands, followed by several seconds of what appeared to be heavy interference. Wheeler's wife of 22 years, Patricia, provided investigators with additional context that complicated the case further. She revealed that in the weeks before his disappearance, Marcus had mentioned unusual experiences during his night drives. "He called me about 2 weeks before he vanished, sounding shaken," Patricia Wheeler told detectives. "He said he'd been driving through Nevada when his truck's electrical system started failing, lights flickering, radio switching stations on its own. He said he had a feeling he was being followed, but whenever he stopped and looked around, there was nothing there. I suggested he might be too tired and needed more rest, but he insisted something was wrong with that stretch of highway." Patricia also provided investigators with a journal her husband had kept in the cab of his truck, which was not among the items recovered from the vehicle. According to Patricia, Marcus had begun documenting strange occurrences along his route in the journal about 3 months before his disappearance. The journal itself was never found. 6 days into the investigation, another piece of evidence emerged when a Nevada Department of Transportation worker discovered Wheeler's trucker cap approximately half a mile from the rest area. The cap was found atop a Joshua tree, nearly 12 feet above the ground, with no obvious explanation for how it had gotten there. No other items belonging to Wheeler were found in the vicinity. The case attracted attention from various quarters, including researchers of unexplained phenomena. Dr. Eleanor Richards, a professor of folklore at the University of Nevada, who specializes in regional legends, noted similarities between Wheeler's disappearance and local stories. "There's a persistent legend in this region about what truckers call the Silent Mile, a stretch of highway where electronic devices fail and drivers experience missing time," Dr. Richards explained. "These stories date back to the 1970s and often involve reports of unusual lights and unexplained vehicle malfunctions. While I approach such accounts from a folkloric perspective, It's worth noting that the rest area, where Wheeler disappeared, falls within the area traditionally associated with these legends. The official investigation remained focused on conventional explanations. Investigators considered the possibility that Wheeler had wandered into the desert, perhaps disoriented due to fatigue or medical issues, and succumbed to the harsh environment. However, the thorough search efforts made this scenario increasingly unlikely. They also explored the possibility of foul play, though the absence of any evidence of struggle or robbery complicated this theory. Wheeler's case remains officially classified as an open missing persons investigation. Continental Transport Services installed a memorial plaque at their Tulsa headquarters, honoring Wheeler's 12 years of service with the company. His truck was eventually returned to service after extensive cleaning, though multiple drivers requested transfers rather than operate the vehicle. Perhaps the most unsettling postscript to the case came 8 months after Wheeler's disappearance, when Trooper Callahan, who had been first to respond to the scene, submitted his resignation from the Nevada Highway Patrol. According to colleagues, Callahan had become increasingly obsessed with the case, spending his off-duty hours at the rest area where Wheeler had vanished. His resignation letter contained a cryptic final paragraph that authorities declined to make public, but which was later leaked to a local newspaper. "I've spent 20 nights watching that rest area now. I've seen what comes there after 3 a.m. I cannot unsee it. I cannot explain it. And I cannot continue to pretend that we are dealing with an ordinary missing persons case. Whatever took Marcus Wheeler that night knows that I've seen it, and I won't be far behind him." Callahan relocated to Oregon shortly afterward and has declined all requests for interviews. The rest area where Marcus Wheeler disappeared was permanently closed by the Nevada Department of Transportation in January 2020, citing structural concerns and maintenance issues. The site remains abandoned, marked only by crumbling asphalt and the occasional trucker's memorial, left by those who remember the driver who vanished into the desert night. To this day, many long-haul drivers refuse to travel that stretch of Highway 95 after dark, creating their own detours that add hours to their journeys. But, and one veteran trucker put it, at least guarantee you'll reach your destination. On the night of October 28, 2013, long-haul trucker Frank Mercer was making his regular route through the Appalachian Mountains of eastern Kentucky. The 51-year-old driver from Roanoke, Virginia, had been with Eastern Freight Lines for over 20 years, known among his colleagues for his unwavering punctuality and meticulous attention to safety protocols. His sterling driving record made what happened that night all the more baffling. Mercer was transporting a shipment of household appliances from a distribution center in Cincinnati to retail locations throughout Virginia. According to his electronic logging device, he had been on the road for approximately 9 hours when he turned onto Kentucky State Route 17, a winding 2-lane highway that cuts through one of the most isolated stretches of the Appalachian Mountains. Local residents call it simply Road 17. As standard procedure, Mercer had checked in with dispatch at 8:45 p.m., confirming his position and estimated arrival time at his next scheduled stop. Lisa Tanner, the night dispatcher for Eastern Freight, noted nothing unusual about the call. Frank sounded completely normal, she later told investigators. He mentioned some fog rolling in, but said visibility was still adequate. His last words were, "Should be through the mountains in about an hour, if the weather holds." At 9:17 p.m., the GPS tracking system on Mercer's truck recorded an unexpected stop. The location was approximately 23 miles along Route 17, a section with no designated rest areas or services. The truck remained stationary for 6 minutes before resuming movement. This brief stop was not logged manually by Mercer, which was unusual given his reputation for documentation. At 9:36 p.m., Mercer's truck again came to a stop, this time on a straight section of road with a wide shoulder. The truck's onboard computer system recorded that the brakes had been applied suddenly, with sufficient force to trigger the vehicle's automatic emergency alert system. Dispatch immediately attempted to contact Mercer via radio and cell phone, but received no response. Following protocol for emergency alerts, Eastern Freight contacted the Kentucky State Police, who dispatched Trooper Michael Harding to the location at 9:52 p.m. What Harding discovered would become the focus of an investigation that remains open to this day. Mercer's truck was found exactly where the GPS had indicated, properly pulled over onto the shoulder, with hazard lights still flashing. The engine was running, the driver's side door was closed but unlocked, and the interior cab light was on. Mercer was nowhere to be found. His cell phone, wallet, and logbook remained in the cab. His jacket was still hanging on the back of the driver's seat, despite the near-freezing temperatures outside. The most perplexing aspect of the scene, as Trooper Harding noted in his initial report, was the complete absence of footprints or disturbance in the gravel shoulder surrounding the truck. A light rain had been falling for several hours, leaving the ground soft enough to record impressions. Yet there were no signs indicating that Mercer, or anyone else, had walked away from the vehicle. It was as if he had simply vanished from inside the cab, Harding wrote. I've been with the state police for 12 years and have never encountered a scene quite like this. The investigation intensified as additional officers arrived. The truck's dash camera, which should have been recording continuously, contained footage that ended abruptly at 9:22 p.m., 14 minutes before the truck came to its final stop. The last frames showed nothing but empty road ahead, though audio captured what investigators described as an unusual low-frequency humming noise that began approximately 30 seconds before the recording terminated. Technical specialists from Eastern Freight confirmed that the camera system had not malfunctioned, but had been manually turned off. This action required entering a specific code known only to the driver and company management, a security feature designed to prevent tampering. Inside the cab, forensic technicians found no evidence of struggle or violence. However, they did discover something unusual on the windshield, a series of markings on the interior glass that appeared to have been made by human fingers dragging across the surface. Analysis revealed the markings contained traces of Mercer's DNA, confirming they had been made by him. The pattern suggested frantic, desperate movements. The investigation took an even more puzzling turn when officers reviewed footage from a highway maintenance camera located approximately 2 miles before the point where Mercer's truck made its final stop. The grainy black and white video showed the truck passing at 9:31 p.m., traveling at normal speed. However, close examination of the footage revealed a discrepancy. The illuminated cab appeared to contain 2 figures rather than one. Due to the poor image quality, investigators could not definitively identify the second figure or determine its nature. As the search for Mercer expanded, investigators interviewed residents living in the vicinity of Road 17. Several accounts added disturbing context to the disappearance. Local resident Eleanor Whitaker, whose farmhouse stood approximately a quarter mile from where Mercer's truck was found, reported unusual experiences on the night in question. Around 9:30, all the power in my house flickered and my phone line went dead, the 72-year-old woman stated. That happens sometimes during storms, but the weather wasn't bad enough for that. What really spooked me was my dogs. I've got 3 hounds that bark at anything that moves, and they all started howling at once. Not barking, but that mournful howl dogs make when they're scared. They wouldn't stop for nearly 10 minutes. I've lived here my whole life, and I've never heard them carry on like that. Another local, James Harmon, who worked the night shift at a mining operation 5 miles from the scene, reported seeing unusual lights in the sky around the time of Mercer's disappearance. They weren't aircraft lights, Harmon insisted. These were different, pulsing blue-white lights that moved too fast and too erratic. I've seen plenty of helicopters and planes out here, and this wasn't like that at all. Perhaps most significant was the statement from Calvin Tucker, a retired trucker who had driven for Eastern Freight until 2010. Tucker contacted investigators after hearing about Mercer's disappearance on the news. "Frank called me 3 weeks before he vanished," Tucker revealed. "We hadn't spoken in months, but he wanted to ask me about Road 17. I drove that route for 15 years, and Frank knew I had some strange experiences there." According to Tucker, Mercer had been experiencing unusual phenomena during his recent trips through the area. He said his radio would pick up voices speaking what sounded like backwards English when he drove that stretch. His lights would dim for no reason. Twice, his engine had shut down completely, only to restart a few minutes later, with no explanation. He asked me if I'd ever experienced anything similar, and I had to tell him yes. Most drivers who regularly travel Road 17 have stories. That's why so many refuse night runs through there. The search for Frank Mercer continued for 3 weeks, with teams combing the heavily forested mountain terrain surrounding Road 17. Cadaver dogs, thermal imaging equipment, and dozens of volunteers yielded no traces. It was as if Mercer had completely vanished from the face of the earth. The only additional piece of physical evidence recovered came 2 months after the disappearance, when a hiker found Mercer's Eastern Freight cap wedged in the branches of a tree nearly 30 feet above ground level, approximately half a mile from where his truck had been abandoned. The cap showed no weathering or damage despite having been exposed to the elements for months. The official investigation remains open but inactive. Multiple theories have been proposed to explain Mercer's disappearance, ranging from voluntary abandonment to foul play, but none adequately account for all the evidence. The lack of footprints, the mysterious second figure in the traffic camera footage, and the manually deactivated dash camera present a puzzle that law enforcement has been unable to solve. Eastern Freight Lines has since implemented a policy requiring drivers to travel Road 17 in pairs, though many drivers simply refuse assignments that include that route, particularly at night. The company installed a small memorial marker near the site where Mercer's truck was found, one of several such markers that now dot the length of Road 17. In 2015, Kentucky State Police released a limited portion of the audio recovered from Mercer's dash camera in hopes that someone might recognize the unusual humming sound captured in the final seconds of recording. Audio analysis experts from the University of Kentucky described the sound as mechanical in nature, but not consistent with any known vehicle or aircraft engine. To date, the source of the sound remains unidentified. Frank Mercer's wife, Caroline, continues to press for answers. Frank was not the kind of man who would abandon his truck or his family, she stated in a recent interview. Something happened on that road that night, something that the authorities either can't or won't explain. All I know is that my husband set out on a routine drive he'd made hundreds of times before, and somehow never made it home. The stretch of Kentucky State Route 17 where Mercer disappeared has developed a notorious reputation among truckers. Many refuse to travel it after dark, creating lengthy detours that cost time and fuel. Those who do drive it report electronic malfunctions, radio interference, and the persistent feeling of being watched. As veteran driver Samuel Reeves put it, there are certain stretches of highway across this country that have accumulated too many stories, too many missing drivers, too many unexplained events. Road 17 is at the top of that list. Whatever happened to Frank Mercer out there? I can tell you this much. It wasn't ordinary. And it wasn't the first time something like that has happened there. The mountains of eastern Kentucky keep their secrets well. For now, the true fate of Frank Mercer remains one of those secrets, whispered about in truck stops and CB radio conversations across the country. A cautionary tale for those who drive the lonely highways after dark. On the night of February 3, 2016, veteran truck driver Dale Morrison departed from a shipping facility in Portland, Oregon, hauling a container of electronic components bound for a technology manufacturer in San Jose, California. The 49-year-old driver had been with Pacific Northwest Transport for nearly 17 years, with an impeccable safety record and reputation for reliability. His scheduled route would take him south along Interstate 5, a journey he had made hundreds of times throughout his career. According to the company's digital logging system, Morrison's trip began without incident. He checked in with dispatch at regular intervals, reporting clear weather and light traffic as he crossed into Northern California. His last routine communication came at 11:42 p.m. as he passed through Redding, California. At that point, Morrison confirmed his intention to continue driving for another hour before stopping at the Sierra Vista rest area for his mandated break period. At 12:37 a.m., Morrison's truck came to an unexpected stop approximately 27 miles south of Redding, in a remote section of highway with no services or rest areas. The truck's GPS system showed it had pulled onto the shoulder of the southbound lane. The onboard computer registered that the engine was still running, but the vehicle was stationary. When Morrison failed to respond to routine check-in attempts, dispatch supervisor Heather Landon followed protocol and attempted to contact him via cell phone and the truck's integrated communication system. After 20 minutes without response, Landon contacted the California Highway Patrol, requesting a welfare check on the driver. Officer Raymond Vasquez arrived at the location at 1:18 a.m. to find a scene that would baffle investigators for years to come. Morrison's truck was exactly where the GPS coordinates had placed it, properly pulled onto the shoulder with hazard lights activated. The engine was running, headlights were on, and the doors were locked. Through the windows, Officer Vasquez could see Morrison's personal effects, including his cell phone, logbook, and a half-empty coffee thermos, but no sign of the driver himself. Using the department's override codes for commercial vehicles, provided for emergency situations, Vasquez gained entry to the cab. The initial assessment indicated no signs of struggle or violence, Vasquez noted in his official report. The cab was organized and intact. The driver's seat was still warm, suggesting Morrison had departed the vehicle recently. Most peculiarly, his keys were still in the ignition, and his wallet, containing identification and $147 in cash, was on the passenger seat. What made the scene particularly unusual was the complete absence of footprints or disturbance in the soft ground surrounding the truck. A light rain had been falling for several hours, leaving the shoulder muddy enough to record any movement, yet there were no tracks leading away from the vehicle. The dash camera, which company policy required to be operational at all times, had been manually disabled at 12:34 a.m., 3 minutes before the truck came to a stop. The mystery deepened when investigators examined Morrison's digital logbook. His final entry, made at 12:33 a.m., contained a message that was markedly out of character for the methodical driver. Weight distribution alarm, load shifting, will investigate. Pacific Northwest Transport confirmed that no weight distribution alarm had been triggered in the truck's systems, and the sealed container showed no evidence of tampering or shifting cargo when examined. A thorough search of the surrounding area was immediately initiated, utilizing K9 units. helicopters with thermal imaging, and dozens of officers on foot. The search radius extended to 5 miles in all directions from the truck, but yielded no trace of Morrison. The only potential evidence discovered was a single work boot, confirmed to belong to Morrison, found approximately 400 yards from the truck in dense underbrush. The boot showed no damage or signs of struggle, appearing as if it had been placed deliberately rather than lost during a confrontation or hasty departure. The investigation took an unsettling turn when technicians examined the truck's electronic systems. The onboard computer had recorded a significant power drain beginning at 12:31 a.m., consistent with an electrical system drawing far more current than all the truck's standard equipment combined. This drain continued until 12:36 a.m., at which point it abruptly returned to normal levels. Engineers from the truck manufacturer could not identify any mechanical malfunction that would explain this anomaly. More disturbing was the recovery of audio from the truck's hands-free communication system. Although the dash camera had been disabled, the audio recording function had continued to operate independently. The final 90 seconds of recording captured several anomalies that forensic audio analysts struggled to explain. At timestamp 12:35:17, Morrison can be heard saying clearly, "That's not possible. The seals are intact." This is followed by 22 seconds of silence. At 12:35:39, a sudden burst of static drowns out all other sound for approximately 7 seconds. When the audio clears, Morrison's voice returns, now sounding distinctly alarmed. "Who are you? How did you get in the—" The recording ends abruptly at 12:35:52. Investigators interviewed other drivers who had been traveling the same stretch of I-5 that night. 3 separate witnesses reported observing unusual lights in the vicinity of where Morrison's truck was found, though their descriptions varied significantly. Trucker Eileen Kozlowski, who passed the location heading northbound approximately 15 minutes before Morrison's disappearance, described seeing bright blue-white lights hovering about 30 feet above the highway. She initially assumed it was a police helicopter, but noted the absence of sound as she passed. Another driver, Marcus Washington, reported his CB radio going haywire as he approached the area, with extreme static and what sounded like voices speaking backwards. Washington also mentioned that his truck's electrical system experienced momentary failures, with dashboard lights flickering and his engine briefly losing power before recovering. Perhaps the most significant testimony came from Kevin Lamar, who passed Morrison's truck on the shoulder at approximately 12:40 a.m., just minutes after the disappearance. "I saw the hazards flashing and slowed down, thinking another driver might need assistance," Lamar stated. "As I passed, I glanced over and could clearly see there was no one in the cab. What struck me as strange was a fog or mist that seemed to be surrounding just that truck, despite the rain having stopped by then. The mist had an odd bluish tint to it. I radioed to ask if everything was okay, but got no response." The investigation expanded to consider Morrison's personal life and background. Interviews with family members, colleagues, and friends revealed no obvious reasons for a voluntary disappearance. Morrison had been married for 22 years, with 2 adult children, maintained strong family relationships, and had no significant financial or legal troubles. His medical records showed no history of mental health issues or conditions that might explain erratic behavior. His wife, Diane Morrison, provided investigators with information that added another layer to the mystery. 3 weeks before he disappeared, Dale told me something that I didn't take seriously at the time, she revealed during a formal interview. He said he'd been experiencing strange occurrences during his night drives on I-5. His truck's electronics would malfunction without explanation. His radio would pick up voices, having conversations that didn't sound like normal CB chatter. Twice, he said he'd seen unusual lights pacing his truck for several miles before disappearing. Diane also shared that her husband had begun taking photographs of his cargo seals before departures and upon arrivals, something not required by company protocol. He said he wanted documentation because twice in the previous month, he'd arrived at his destination to find the seals intact, but with evidence that the cargo had been disturbed. Both times, inventory counts showed nothing missing, but items had been rearranged inside the containers. His supervisors suggested he might have misremembered the original loading configuration. As the investigation continued, authorities discovered that Morrison was not the first driver to experience unusual phenomena on that particular stretch of I-5. Department records revealed 3 previous incidents since 2010 involving truckers reporting electronic malfunctions, unusual lights, and unexplained cargo disturbances in the same approximate location. None of these incidents had resulted in disappearances, but the similarities could not be dismissed as coincidental. 6 months after Morrison's disappearance, a forestry worker discovered his Pacific Northwest Transport identification badge in a clearing approximately 3 miles from where his truck had been found. The badge showed no weathering or exposure damage, despite having been outdoors for half a year. More strangely, it was found placed carefully atop a flat rock, positioned as if intentionally left to be discovered. The case remains officially open, but inactive. Dale Morrison's status is still listed as a missing person, though the circumstances of his disappearance have led many, including some investigators, to doubt that conventional explanations will ever suffice. Pacific Northwest Transport has since implemented a policy requiring drivers to travel in pairs through that section of I-5 during night hours, and many independent truckers refuse night assignments that include that stretch of highway. The company installed a small memorial marker near mile marker 687, where Morrison's truck was found. It bears a simple inscription: "For Dale Morrison and all those who travel these roads alone at night." Local drivers report that fresh flowers appear at the marker regularly, though no one has ever seen who places them there. As for Morrison's truck, it was eventually returned to service after extensive mechanical inspection and electrical system replacement. However, 3 different drivers reported experiencing unexplained electrical malfunctions, radio interference, and a persistent feeling of being watched while operating the vehicle. The company ultimately sold the truck to an out-of-state buyer. Senior investigator James Harmon, who led the Morrison case for 2 years before his retirement, offered a sobering assessment in his final case notes. "In 30 years of law enforcement, I've encountered many unexplained disappearances. Most eventually yield to logical explanation. The Morrison case stands apart. The complete absence of physical evidence, the electronic anomalies, and the audio recording suggests something occurred on that highway that goes beyond our conventional understanding. I leave this case officially unsolved, with the personal belief that whatever happened to Dale Morrison that night was not something our current investigative frameworks are equipped to comprehend." To this day, truckers traveling I-5 through Northern California share Morrison's story as a cautionary tale. Many drivers refuse to stop along that isolated stretch, even for emergencies, preferring to continue to more populated areas. The section has acquired the nickname the Vanishing Mile among the trucking community, and CB radio channels often fall silent as drivers pass through it, particularly during the late-night hours when Dale Morrison encountered whatever fate still awaits explanation. On July 8, 2019, Veteran truck driver Trevor Simmons embarked on what should have been a routine delivery from Phoenix, Arizona to Salt Lake City, Utah. The 38-year-old driver had been with Continental Shipping for nearly a decade, maintaining an exemplary safety record and reputation for timeliness. His scheduled route would take him north along Interstate 15 through the remote desert landscapes of northern Arizona and southern Utah, a journey he had completed dozens of times throughout his career. According to Continental Shipping's tracking system, Simmons departed the Phoenix distribution center at 2:15 p.m. with a full load of packaged consumer electronics. The manifest listed the cargo weight at 17.4 tons, well within the legal limit for his vehicle class. Throughout the afternoon, Simmons made his required check-ins with dispatch, reporting no issues as he crossed into Utah. His last standard communication came at 7:42 p.m. as he passed through Cedar City, Utah, approximately 250 miles into his journey. "Everything's running smooth," Simmons told dispatcher Rachel Winters during this final check-in. "Weather's clear, traffic's light. Should make Salt Lake by midnight if nothing changes." Dispatch logs indicate nothing unusual about this communication, though Winters would later note that Simmons sounded perhaps a bit more tired than usual, but nothing concerning. At 8:37 p.m., Continental's monitoring system recorded an unexpected deviation in Simmons's route. His truck left Interstate 15 at a remote exit leading only to Desert Valley Road, an isolated two-lane highway that services a handful of small ranches and a decommissioned mining operation. This detour was not part of his planned route, nor had he communicated any intention to leave the interstate. When the truck continued along this secondary road for more than 20 minutes, dispatch attempted to contact Simmons for clarification. These attempts received no response. Following company protocol for unexpected deviations, Continental Shipping tried to reach Simmons through multiple channels: radio, cell phone, and the truck's integrated communication system, all without success. At 9:14 p.m., the truck's GPS showed it had come to a complete stop, approximately 17 miles along Desert Valley Road. The onboard diagnostic system transmitted data indicating the engine was still running, but the vehicle was stationary. When continued attempts to reach Simmons failed, Continental Shipping contacted the Utah Highway Patrol at 9:32 p.m., requesting an emergency welfare check. Trooper Daniel Blackwood arrived at the location at 10:08 p.m. What he discovered would become the focus of one of Utah's most perplexing missing persons investigations. Simmons's truck was parked neatly on the shoulder of the road, hazard lights flashing, engine idling smoothly. There were no signs of mechanical failure or accident. The doors were locked, and through the windows, Trooper Blackwood could see Simmons's cell phone on the dashboard and his logbook open on the passenger seat. There was no sign of the driver himself. Using emergency override protocols, Blackwood gained entry to the vehicle. His initial inspection revealed several unusual details that he documented in his report. The cab interior was undisturbed, with no indication of struggle or violence. The driver's personal effects, wallet containing $127, and identification, cell phone, insulated coffee mug still warm to the touch, were all present. Most notably, the keys remained in the ignition, with the engine running. The most disturbing discovery came when Blackwood examined the truck's electronic logging system. Simmons's final manual entry, made at 8:34 p.m., read only: "Something wrong with the load, getting heavier, need to check." This was followed by an automated system alert at 8:52 p.m. registering "cargo weight distribution warning," indicating a significant shift in the load. However, when Blackwood inspected the trailer, he found the cargo doors securely locked, with the company seals intact. The mystery deepened when highway patrol officers conducted a preliminary search of the surrounding area. Despite the dry, dusty terrain that should have preserved footprints, they found no tracks leading away from the vehicle. The only disruption to the desert soil was a peculiar circular pattern, approximately 20 feet in diameter, centered on the truck's trailer. Forensic specialists would later describe this pattern as consistent with an intense downward pressure that compressed the soil beyond normal vehicle weight distribution. As the search for Simmons expanded, authorities brought in the trailer contents for examination. The cargo seals were broken under supervision and videotaped for evidence. Inside, investigators found the electronic shipment exactly as manifested, with no signs of tampering or disturbance. However, weight measurements taken at the scene revealed a significant discrepancy. The cargo now weighed 16.3 tons, approximately 1 ton lighter than when it had departed Phoenix. Continental Shipping confirmed that the electronic weight sensors on the truck had recorded a steadily increasing weight during the journey, contrary to the physical evidence that now suggested the load had somehow lost mass. Technical experts could offer no explanation for this contradiction. The investigation took an even more puzzling turn when authorities reviewed data from the truck's various electronic systems. The onboard computer showed that between 8:37 p.m. and 9:14 p.m., the truck had experienced multiple electrical anomalies, including power fluctuations, GPS coordinate jumping, and dashboard instrument malfunctions. Most significantly, the truck's weight distribution sensors had recorded a progressive increase in cargo weight beginning at 8:40 p.m., despite no physical explanation for such a phenomenon. The dash camera, which should have been recording continuously, contained footage that ended abruptly at 8:36 p.m., 1 minute before Simmons diverted from his route. The final frames showed normal highway driving, with no apparent distress or unusual occurrences. Audio analysis of the cab recording system's last minutes revealed only routine engine noise until 8:35 p.m., when a low-frequency humming became audible, gradually increasing in volume until the recording terminated. Investigators interviewed other drivers who had been on Interstate 15 that evening. 2 truckers reported observing Simmons' vehicle shortly before it exited the highway. Both described seeing unusual illumination around the trailer. "It wasn't like normal running lights," stated Daniel Friedman, a driver for Midwest Express, who had been approximately half a mile behind Simmons. "There was a kind of bluish glow coming from underneath the trailer. I thought maybe he was having electrical problems with his undercarriage lighting system." Another witness, independent hauler Sophia Reyes, provided even more unusual testimony. "I passed Simmons heading northbound around 8:30. What caught my eye was how his trailer seemed to be riding unusually low, like it was carrying maximum weight or beyond. The strange thing was, I remember thinking the tractor unit looked like it was straining, like something was pulling it backward. In 20 years of driving, I've never seen a rig move quite like that." The investigation expanded to consider Simmons's personal background and mental state. Interviews with family members, colleagues, and his physician revealed no concerning patterns. Simmons had no history of mental health issues, substance abuse, or financial problems. He had been married for 12 years, with 2 children, maintained strong family relationships, and had recently received a performance bonus from Continental. There were no indications of personal distress or intentions to disappear. Simmons' wife, Andrea, provided investigators with information that added another dimension to the case. 2 weeks before he disappeared, Trevor mentioned something odd that happened on his Utah route, she told detectives. He said he'd experienced what he called a dead zone along I-15, where his radio and phone lost signal simultaneously. While in this dead zone, He said the truck felt different, heavier, harder to steer. He told me it lasted about 10 minutes before everything returned to normal. He reported it to his supervisor, but was told it was probably just a communication tower outage, coinciding with some bad road conditions. Andrea also revealed that her husband had begun carrying a personal audio recorder during his drives after this incident. He wanted documentation if it happened again, she explained. This recorder was not among the personal effects found in the truck. The search for Trevor Simmons continued for 3 weeks, utilizing ground teams, helicopter surveillance, cadaver dogs, and thermal imaging technology. The operation covered more than 50 square miles of surrounding desert without yielding any significant evidence. The only potential clue came from an infrared aerial survey that detected an unusual thermal pattern extending in a straight line from where the truck had been parked to a mesa approximately 3 miles east. This pattern, which showed significantly cooler ground temperatures in a corridor about 10 feet wide, had no geological or botanical explanation. 6 months after Simmons' disappearance, a recreational hiker discovered his Continental Shipping identification badge at the base of the mesa that had shown the thermal anomaly. The badge showed no weathering or environmental damage, despite months of exposure to harsh desert conditions. More disturbing was the discovery that the magnetic strip on the back of the badge had been completely demagnetized, and the plastic laminate contained microscopic fracture patterns consistent with exposure to intense pressure. The case remains officially classified as an open missing persons investigation. Continental Shipping has since implemented a policy requiring drivers to travel in pairs through that section of Interstate 15, particularly during evening hours. The company also upgraded their fleet with enhanced tracking and communication systems that function on multiple frequency bands simultaneously to prevent similar communication failures. Trevor Simmons' truck was thoroughly examined by multiple independent engineering firms before being returned to service. Despite no mechanical or structural issues being identified, 3 subsequent drivers reported experiencing unusual phenomena while operating the vehicle, including electrical malfunctions, unexplained weight distribution warnings, and a persistent feeling of something moving in the trailer. Continental Shipping eventually retired the vehicle from active service. The section of Desert Valley Road where Simmons disappeared has become something of a macabre landmark. Some truckers make detours specifically to drive past the location, while others refuse assignments that would take them anywhere near the area. Local residents report that the site occasionally attracts researchers of unexplained phenomena, as well as individuals leaving memorial items for the missing driver. Dr. Eleanor Richards, a physicist from the University of Utah, who examined the soil compression patterns as part of the investigation, offered perhaps the most thought-provoking assessment. The physical evidence at the scene suggests forces at work that cannot be explained by conventional mechanical or environmental factors. The compression pattern, the thermal anomaly, and the trailer weight discrepancy point to something that operated outside our standard physical parameters. While I hesitate to speculate beyond the empirical data, I can state with scientific certainty that whatever occurred that night involved energy transfers and gravitational anomalies that merit further research. The disappearance of Trevor Simmons remains one of the most thoroughly documented, yet completely unexplained cases in modern transportation history. For the trucking community, it serves as a sobering reminder of the vast, isolated landscapes they traverse and the unexplained phenomena that sometimes occur in the liminal spaces between cities, in the dark hours when most of the world sleeps. On November 15, 2017, long-haul trucker Michael Reynolds departed from a distribution center in Toledo, Ohio, transporting automotive parts to a manufacturing facility in Winnipeg, Manitoba. The 41-year-old driver had been with Heartland Logistics for nearly 8 years, establishing a reputation for reliability and safety consciousness. His planned route would take him through Michigan's Upper Peninsula and across Minnesota before crossing the Canadian border, a journey of approximately 1,200 miles that he had completed numerous times in his career. According to Heartland's tracking system, Reynolds' journey proceeded without incident through Michigan. He made his scheduled check-ins with dispatch, reporting good road conditions, despite light snow beginning to fall as he approached the Wisconsin border. His final routine communication occurred at 10:13 p.m. as he entered Minnesota, informing dispatch that he would make his mandatory rest stop at the Pine Ridge Truck Plaza, approximately 90 miles ahead. At 11:47 p.m., the company's monitoring system registered an unexpected change in Reynolds' driving pattern. His truck, which had been maintaining a steady speed of 62 mph, suddenly decelerated rapidly before coming to a complete stop on a remote stretch of Highway 53, approximately 30 miles south of International Falls. This section of highway is particularly isolated, cutting through dense forest with no services or residences for several miles in either direction. When Reynolds failed to respond to standard check-in attempts, dispatch supervisor Martin Wilson initiated emergency protocols, contacting the Minnesota State Patrol at 12:05 a.m. Trooper Elizabeth Carver arrived at the location at 12:43 a.m., discovering a scene that would become the focus of an investigation that remains unresolved to this day. Reynolds' truck was found properly pulled onto the shoulder, hazard lights flashing, engine still running. The doors were locked, and through the windows, Trooper Carver observed no signs of disturbance inside the cab. After gaining entry, she documented a scene that defied conventional explanation. Reynolds' personal belongings, wallet, cell phone, insulated coffee mug still half full and warm, remained in the cab. His logbook lay open on the passenger seat with a partial entry that ended mid-sentence. Unusual oncoming lights on highway, not matching any vehicle I've seen. Pulling over to let it pay. The dash camera, which company policy required to be operational at all times, contained footage that ended abruptly at 11:45 p.m., 2 minutes before the truck came to a stop. The final frames showed the dark, empty highway ahead, illuminated only by the truck's headlights. In the last 3 seconds of footage, a bright light appears at the extreme edge of the camera's field of view, growing rapidly in intensity until the screen whites out completely and the recording terminates. The most perplexing aspect of the scene was the condition of the truck's windshield. Though intact, the interior surface displayed an unusual pattern that forensic specialists would later describe as crystalline residue, consistent with rapid freezing. This substance, when analyzed, proved to be ordinary water condensation that had somehow frozen instantaneously, despite the cab's heating system running at full capacity. More disturbing was the discovery that the driver's side window exhibited a perfect handprint on its interior surface, confirmed through fingerprint analysis to belong to Reynolds. The pattern suggested he had pressed his palm against the glass with significant force. Outside the vehicle, Trooper Carver noted an unusual pattern of disruption in the light snow that had accumulated on the shoulder. Extending from the driver's side of the truck was a single set of footprints, confirmed by measurement to match Reynolds' boot size, that proceeded approximately 7 feet from the vehicle before stopping abruptly. There was no indication of the prints continuing, returning to the vehicle, or being obscured by external factors. As Carver noted in her official report, it appears as though the subject simply vanished mid-stride, The search for Michael Reynolds began immediately, with additional officers arriving within the hour. By daybreak, a comprehensive operation was underway, utilizing K-9 units, helicopters with thermal imaging capability, and dozens of officers on foot. Despite ideal search conditions, fresh snow that would preserve any tracks, clear weather, and open terrain in many areas, no trace of Reynolds was discovered beyond those 7 footprints leading away from his truck. The investigation took an unusual turn when officers reviewed data from Reynolds' cell phone and the truck's onboard computer system. Beginning at approximately 11:30 p.m., Reynolds had attempted to make 4 calls to Heartland's emergency dispatch line, none of which had been received by the company. The truck's communications system registered multiple attempts to transmit an emergency signal during the same time frame, also unsuccessful. Technical specialists confirmed that both systems had been functioning normally, but appeared to have encountered an external interference that blocked all outgoing communications. Further analysis of the truck's electronic systems revealed additional anomalies. Between 11:43 p.m. and 11:47 p.m., the onboard computer recorded extreme fluctuations in the electrical system, with power surges exceeding the vehicle's normal operating parameters by over 300%. The engine diagnostic system registered a momentary temperature drop in the cab from 72 degrees to 28 degrees in a span of less than 30 seconds before returning to normal, an environmental change that engineers deemed physically impossible given the vehicle's insulation and heating capabilities. Investigators interviewed other drivers who had been traveling on Highway 53 that night. 2 witnesses reported observing unusual phenomena in the vicinity where Reynolds disappeared. Caroline Murray, driving southbound, reported passing Reynolds' truck heading north at approximately 11:40 p.m. What caught my attention was a bright light that seemed to be following his truck at a distance, Murray stated. At first, I thought it was another vehicle with its high beams on, but the light was too concentrated and too white, almost blue-white, like an LED on its highest setting. It didn't move like a normal vehicle either. It seemed to drift slightly from side to side while maintaining the same distance behind him. Another witness, Thomas Blackwood, had been driving approximately 2 miles behind Reynolds. Around 11:45, I saw what looked like lightning ahead, except it was concentrated in one spot on the highway. There was no storm that night. Sky was clear with some light snow. This light was bright enough that I had to shield my eyes. When I could see again, I noticed hazard lights on the shoulder up ahead. By the time I reached the spot, there was no other vehicle visible except for the truck with its flashers on. I slowed down, but didn't stop since everything looked properly parked, and I figured the driver was just taking a break. The investigation expanded to examine Reynolds' background and mental state prior to his disappearance. Interviews with family members, colleagues, and his physician revealed no concerning patterns. Reynolds had no history of mental health issues, substance abuse, or financial problems. He was described as happily married with 3 children, financially stable, and professionally satisfied. There were no indications of personal distress or intentions to disappear. His wife, Jennifer Reynolds, provided investigators with information that added context to the case. 3 weeks before he disappeared, Mike told me about something strange that happened on his Minnesota route, she told detectives. He said he'd seen unusual lights on the highway that didn't match any vehicle he recognized. He described them as too bright and too fluid in how they moved. He reported it to his supervisor, but was told it was probably just another driver with modified headlights or possibly emergency vehicles responding to an accident. Jennifer also revealed that her husband had begun taking a different route through Minnesota when possible after this incident, adding approximately 40 miles to his journey. He never said he was afraid exactly, she explained. Mike wasn't that type of person. But he did say the lights gave him a wrong feeling, and he preferred to avoid that stretch of highway when he could. The night he disappeared, his alternate route was closed due to road construction, so he had to take Highway 53. The search for Michael Reynolds continued for 4 weeks before being scaled back to periodic patrols and investigative follow-ups. Throughout this period, not a single additional piece of physical evidence was discovered. The only development came 2 months after his disappearance, when a forestry worker found Reynolds' Heartland Logistics cap hanging from a tree branch, approximately 12 feet above ground level, nearly 3 miles from where his truck had been abandoned. The cap showed no weather damage or exposure effects, despite having been outdoors during a Minnesota winter. The case remains officially classified as an open missing persons investigation. Heartland Logistics has implemented a policy requiring drivers to travel in pairs through that section of Highway 53, particularly during night hours. The company also upgraded their fleet with enhanced communication systems that operate on multiple frequencies simultaneously to prevent similar signal blocking. Reynolds' truck underwent extensive examination by mechanical engineers, electrical specialists, and forensic technicians before being returned to service. Despite no structural or mechanical issues being identified, 2 subsequent drivers reported experiencing electrical malfunctions and unexplained cold spots while operating the vehicle. Heartland eventually retired the truck from their fleet and donated it to a technical college for training purposes, after removing all identification numbers and repainting it. The stretch of Highway 53 where Reynolds disappeared has acquired a reputation among truckers, many of whom refuse assignments that would require traveling that route after dark. Local residents report that drivers often increase their speed significantly when passing through that specific section, regardless of weather conditions or posted limits. Dr. Elaine Sorensen, a professor of atmospheric physics who consulted on the case, offered perhaps the most thought-provoking assessment. The physical evidence, the instantaneous freezing pattern, the electrical anomalies, the communication disruption, suggests an event involving energy transfers that fall outside conventional understanding. The temperature drop recorded in the cab would require an enormous and instantaneous extraction of thermal energy that our current models of thermodynamics cannot readily explain in that environment. For the Reynolds family, the lack of closure remains the most difficult aspect of the case. Jennifer Reynolds continues to advocate for the investigation, maintaining a website dedicated to her husband's disappearance and the unusual circumstances surrounding it. Someone somewhere knows something, she stated in a recent interview. Whether it's another driver who saw something that night, or someone with specialized knowledge about these phenomena on isolated highways, I believe there are answers out there. What happened to Mike wasn't a conventional disappearance, and we won't find him through conventional means. The disappearance of Michael Reynolds stands as one of the most thoroughly documented yet completely unexplained cases in the modern trucking industry. For those who travel America's isolated highways during the late hours, particularly through the northern forests of Minnesota, it serves as a sobering reminder of the unexplained phenomena that occasionally intrude upon the routines of those who make their living on the road. Many drivers now report maintaining dash cams of their own, separate from company equipment, hoping to capture evidence of the mysterious lights should they appear again on Highway 53. On March 21, 2020, veteran truck driver Samuel Corbin departed from a distribution center in Billings, Montana, transporting a shipment of medical supplies destined for hospitals in Seattle, Washington. The 52-year-old driver had worked for Westland Transport for over 16 years, maintaining an exemplary safety record throughout his career. His planned route would take him across the northern Rocky Mountains via Interstate 90, a journey he had completed hundreds of times without incident. According to Westland's digital tracking system, Corbin's journey proceeded routinely through the afternoon. He made his scheduled check-ins with dispatch, reporting good road conditions despite intermittent rain as he approached the Idaho border. His final standard communication occurred at 8:42 p.m. as he passed through Coeur d'Alene, Idaho, where he confirmed his intention to continue driving for another 2 hours before stopping at the Cascade View rest area for his mandatory break period. At 10:17 p.m., Corbin's truck unexpectedly deviated from Interstate 90, taking exit 34 onto a secondary road that led into a remote forested area. This unplanned detour triggered an automatic alert in Westland's monitoring system. When dispatch attempted to contact Corbin for clarification, they received no response through any communication channel, neither the truck's integrated system, his company's cell phone, nor CB radio. Following protocol for unexplained deviations, dispatch supervisor Teresa Langley contacted the Washington State Patrol at 10:31 p.m. Trooper James Wilson was dispatched to investigate, arriving at the location at 11:08 p.m. What he discovered would become the focus of one of Washington's most baffling missing persons cases. Corbin's truck was found properly parked on a wide shoulder, approximately 7 miles from the interstate exit. The engine was still running, headlights on, hazard lights activated. The doors were locked, and through the windows, Trooper Wilson could see no signs of disturbance inside the cab. After gaining entry, he documented a scene that defied conventional explanation. Corbin's personal belongings, wallet containing identification, and $216 in cash, company cell phone, and logbook remained in the cab. A thermos of coffee was still warm to the touch. The logbook's final entry, made at 10:12 p.m., contained a single line: "Unusual broadcast coming through radio. Will investigate frequency source." The most perplexing discovery was the condition of the truck's electronic systems. The dashboard display was operating normally, but the digital readouts were displaying impossible values. The external temperature gauge read, despite the actual temperature being around 45 degrees, and the clock was frozen at 10:17 p.m., cycling backward and forward between 10:16 and 10:18 continuously. The truck's CB radio was emitting a continuous low-frequency tone that Trooper Wilson described in his report as unlike any radio interference I've encountered in my 15 years of service. The dash camera, which company policy required to be operational at all times, contained footage that ended abruptly at 10:15 p.m., 2 minutes before the truck had exited the interstate. The final frames showed normal highway driving, but the audio portion captured an unusual sequence: a burst of static followed by what sounded like a human voice speaking at extremely low frequency. Audio specialists would later analyze this recording and determine that it was a human voice played at approximately 30% normal speed, rendering the words unintelligible in real time. Outside the vehicle, Trooper Wilson discovered a single set of footprints leading from the driver's side door into the surrounding forest. The prints, later confirmed to match Corbin's work boots, proceeded approximately 30 feet from the truck before abruptly disappearing at the base of a large cedar tree. Despite the soft, rain-dampened soil that should have preserved any tracks, there was no indication of the prints continuing, changing direction, or being obscured by external factors. The search for Samuel Corbin began immediately, with additional officers arriving within the hour. By morning, a comprehensive operation was underway, utilizing K-9 units, helicopters with thermal imaging capability, and dozens of officers and volunteers on foot. The search expanded to cover 5 square miles of dense forest surrounding the truck's location, but yielded no further evidence of Corbin's whereabouts or movements. The investigation took a disturbing turn when technicians examined data from the truck's onboard computer system. Beginning at 10:07 p.m., the system had recorded a series of anomalous electromagnetic readings in the immediate environment around the vehicle. Spikes of activity that engineers from Westland Transport could not attribute to any known equipment in the truck or common external sources. More concerning was the discovery that between 10:14 p.m. and 10:17 p.m., the truck's electrical system had experienced a power surge measuring over 400% above normal operating parameters. Yet no fuses had blown and no circuits had been damaged. Investigators interviewed other drivers who had been traveling on Interstate 90 that night. 3 separate witnesses reported unusual experiences in the vicinity where Corbin had exited the highway. Martin Delaney, driving approximately 15 minutes ahead of Corbin, stated that his own CB radio had picked up an unusual broadcast around 10:00 p.m. It wasn't typical trucker chatter, Delaney explained. At first, I thought it was a foreign language station bleeding through, but the voice had an unusual quality, almost mechanical, but with human inflections. After about 30 seconds, my radio went completely dead and didn't function again until I was nearly to Spokane. Another driver, Vanessa Torres, reported passing exit 34 around 10:20 p.m. and observing a column of what looked like mist or smoke rising from the forest about half a mile from the highway. Torres initially assumed it was a small forest fire, but noted that the column had a strange bluish tint and remained perfectly vertical despite the wind that night. She called it in to emergency services, but by the time fire crews arrived at 10:45 p.m., there was no evidence of fire or smoke in the area. Perhaps most significant was the testimony from Peter Hawkins, who had been driving approximately 3 miles behind Corbin. Around 10:15, my truck's electrical system went haywire, Hawkins stated. Lights flickering, dashboard gauges jumping all over, radio cycling through stations on its own. Then my CB radio turned on by itself, and I heard a voice repeating the same phrase over and over, something that sounded like, "Return to point of origin." The voice had a strange echo quality, like it was coming from the bottom of a well. This continued for maybe a minute, then everything went back to normal. When I passed exit 34, I had a strong impulse to take that exit, like an overwhelming urge. I actually had to grip my steering wheel tighter to stay on the interstate. Never felt anything like it before or since. The investigation expanded to examine Corbin's personal background and mental state prior to his disappearance. Interviews with family members, colleagues, and his physician revealed no concerning patterns. Corbin had no history of mental health issues, substance abuse, or financial troubles. He was described as contentedly divorced for 5 years, maintained good relationships with his 2 adult children, and had recently purchased a small cabin in Montana, where he planned to eventually retire. His daughter, Rebecca Corbin, provided investigators with information that added context to the case. About 2 weeks before he disappeared, my dad called me sounding puzzled, she told detectives. He said he'd been experiencing unusual radio interference during his night drives on I-90. He described it as voices that sounded slowed down breaking through even when the radio was off. He'd mentioned it to his supervisor and the company mechanic, but they found nothing wrong with his equipment and suggested it might be interference from military communications in the area. Rebecca also revealed that her father had begun recording these strange broadcasts using a personal digital recorder, which was not among the items recovered from his truck. He told me he was going to compile these recordings and submit them to an engineering friend of his who worked in communications. He was methodical that way, always wanted to understand how things worked and why they happened. The search for Samuel Corbin continued for 3 weeks before being scaled back to periodic patrols and investigative follow-ups. Throughout this period, only one additional piece of evidence was discovered. Corbin's digital recorder was found 7 weeks after his disappearance by hikers, suspended from a tree branch approximately 12 feet off the ground, nearly 2 miles from where his truck had been abandoned. The device showed no weather damage, despite exposure to the elements, and its battery was fully charged, an impossibility given the device's known battery life of 48 hours. When the recorder's contents were analyzed, investigators found 7 audio files recorded between March 8th and March 21st. 6 contained the radio interference Corbin had described to his daughter, voices speaking at what audio specialists confirmed was approximately 30% normal speed. When these recordings were accelerated to normal human speech patterns, the content became clear. Fragments of what appeared to be standard trucking communications, but discussing routes and locations that did not exist on any current map. The final recording, time-stamped 10:14 p.m. on March 21st, moments before Corbin's disappearance, contained only 18 seconds of audio. Corbin's voice saying, "I can see it now through the trees," the source of the broadcast. "This isn't possible." Followed by a sound that audio engineers described as similar to the atmospheric distortion caused by extreme electrical discharge, but with harmonics that don't match any known natural or man-made electrical phenomenon. The case remains officially classified as an open missing persons investigation. Westland Transport has implemented a policy prohibiting drivers from exiting the interstate between Coeur d'Alene and Spokane during night hours without direct authorization from dispatch. They also upgraded their fleet with enhanced communication systems, featuring electromagnetic shielding and backup power sources. Corbin's truck underwent extensive examination by electrical engineers, communications specialists, and forensic technicians before being returned to service. Despite no mechanical issues being identified, 3 different drivers reported experiencing unusual radio interference and instrument malfunctions while operating the vehicle on the same route. Westland eventually removed the truck from interstate service, reassigning it to local delivery routes that didn't include the I-90 corridor where Corbin had disappeared. The stretch of secondary road where Corbin's truck was found has developed a reputation among truckers, many of whom refuse to take exit 34 under any circumstances, particularly after dark. Local residents report that CB radio communications often go silent as drivers pass that exit, with many truckers switching channels or turning their radios off entirely when approaching the area. Dr. Raymond Castellanos, an electrical engineer who consulted on the case, offered perhaps the most thought-provoking assessment. The electromagnetic anomalies recorded by the truck's systems, combined with the audio phenomena and the inexplicable power characteristics of the recovered recording device, suggest interactions with energy forms that our current scientific understanding cannot fully explain. The localized nature of these phenomena, centered around a specific geographic location, is particularly significant and warrants further investigation. For the Corbin family, the lack of closure remains devastating. Rebecca Corbin continues to advocate for the investigation, maintaining a website dedicated to her father's disappearance and the unusual circumstances surrounding it. The authorities treated this initially as a standard missing persons case, she stated in a recent interview. But there was nothing standard about what happened to my father. The evidence points to something beyond conventional explanation, something that was communicating through radio frequencies and somehow lured him off the interstate. We may not have the scientific framework to fully understand what occurred that night, but dismissing it as a routine disappearance ensures we never will. The disappearance of Samuel Corbin remains one of the most thoroughly documented yet unexplained cases in the modern trucking industry. For those who travel America's highways during the late hours, particularly through the remote forests of the Pacific Northwest, it serves as a disturbing reminder of the unknown phenomena that occasionally manifest in these isolated corridors. Many drivers now maintain their own recording equipment and travel in convoys when passing through the area after dark, unwilling to risk becoming the next unexplained entry in the growing catalog of truckers who have vanished while following mysterious frequencies into the night. On August 7, 2021, experienced truck driver Ethan Walters embarked on what should have been a routine delivery from Santa Fe, New Mexico to Las Vegas, Nevada. The 45-year-old driver had been with Southwestern Freight Systems for over 12 years, building a reputation for reliability and attention to safety protocols. His planned route would take him northwest through the desert landscapes of northern Arizona and southern Nevada, a journey he had completed dozens of times throughout his career. According to company records, Walters departed the Santa Fe Distribution Center at 3:40 p.m., transporting a shipment of commercial restaurant equipment. His truck was equipped with Southwestern's advanced tracking system, which monitored location, speed, and mechanical diagnostics in real time. Throughout the afternoon and early evening, Walters made his required check-ins with dispatch, reporting good road conditions and clear weather as he crossed into Arizona on Interstate 40. His final routine communication came at 9:26 p.m. as he approached Kingman, Arizona, where he confirmed his intention to continue on US 93 toward Las Vegas. "Everything's running smoothly," Walters told dispatcher Maya Rodriguez. "Traffic is light, weather's clear. Should make it to Vegas by midnight." Rodriguez would later testify that there was nothing unusual about this communication, describing Walters as focused and professional, as always. At 10:47 p.m., Southwestern's monitoring system detected an unexpected deviation in Walters' route. His truck turned off US 93 onto a secondary road, identified as Coyote Pass Road, an isolated stretch leading into the Black Mountains. This unscheduled detour automatically triggered an alert at the company's operations center. When dispatch attempted to contact Walters for clarification, they received no response through the truck's communication system, his company-issued mobile phone, or CB radio. Following established protocol for unexpected route changes, Rodriguez escalated the situation to operations manager Daniel Hernandez, who authorized emergency tracking measures and contacted the Arizona Highway Patrol at 11:15 p.m. Trooper Alicia Mendez was dispatched to investigate, arriving at the location at 11:52 p.m. What she discovered would become the focus of one of Arizona's most perplexing missing persons investigations. Walters' truck was found parked approximately 14 miles along Coyote Pass Road, in a wide turnout overlooking a desert valley. The vehicle was properly secured, hazard lights activated, engine off, doors locked. Through the windows, Trooper Mendez observed no signs of disturbance inside the cab. After gaining entry, using emergency override protocols, she documented a scene that raised immediate concerns. Walters' personal belongings, wallet containing identification, and $184 in cash, company mobile phone, water bottle half full, remained in the cab. His logbook lay open on the passenger seat with a final entry at 10:45 p.m. that read, "Unusual mirage-like structure visible from highway, pulling off to investigate." The truck's keys were missing from the ignition. The dash camera, which company policy mandated remain operational at all times, contained footage that ended abruptly at 10:43 p.m., 4 minutes before the truck had turned onto Coyote Pass Road. The final frames showed normal highway driving with nothing unusual visible. However, the audio portion captured Walters saying, "What the hell is that?" followed by the sound of the turn signal activating. Outside the vehicle, Trooper Mendez discovered a single set of footprints leading from the driver's side door toward the edge of the turnout, where a hiking path descended into the valley below. The prints, later confirmed to match Walter's work boots, continued for approximately 50 yards down the path before suddenly disappearing on a flat rock surface. Despite the surrounding soft soil that should have preserved any tracks, there was no indication of the prints continuing, changing direction, or being obscured by natural means. The search for Ethan Walters began immediately, with additional officers arriving before dawn. By morning, a comprehensive operation was underway, utilizing K9 units, helicopter surveillance with thermal imaging capability, and dozens of officers and volunteers on foot. The search extended 5 miles in all directions from the truck's location, but yielded no further evidence of Walters' presence or movement through the area. The investigation took an unusual turn when forensic technicians examined the truck's electronic systems. The onboard computer had recorded a series of anomalous readings beginning at 10:41 p.m., 6 minutes before Walters turned off the highway. These included dramatic fluctuations in the atmospheric pressure sensors, GPS coordinate jumping that suggested the truck was momentarily in multiple locations simultaneously, and a brief power surge that affected all electrical systems but caused no damage to the vehicle's components. Most disturbing was the discovery that the truck's external temperature sensors had recorded an instantaneous drop from 89 degrees to 34 degrees at precisely 10:43 p.m., the exact moment the dash camera failed. This temperature anomaly lasted exactly 17 seconds before returning to normal desert night temperatures. Engineers from the truck manufacturer confirmed that such a rapid temperature change would be physically impossible under normal atmospheric conditions. Investigators interviewed other drivers who had been traveling on US 93 that night. 4 separate witnesses reported unusual experiences in the vicinity where Walters had diverted from his route. Jessica Reyes, driving approximately 20 minutes ahead of Walters, stated that her vehicle's electrical system had experienced momentary failures around 10:30 p.m. My dashboard lights flickered, radio cut out, and for about 10 seconds, my engine sputtered like it was going to stall, she reported. Then everything went back to normal. I've been driving that route for years and never experienced anything like that. Another driver, Marcus Washington, reported seeing what he initially thought was a mirage, approximately 2 miles before the Coyote Pass Road turnoff. At first, I thought it was just heat shimmer, even though it was night, Washington explained. Then I realized I was seeing what looked like a structure, like a tall building or tower, where I know there's nothing but open desert. It seemed to be glowing slightly from within, with a bluish tint. I blinked, and it was gone. I actually rubbed my eyes and thought I must be more tired than I realized. Perhaps most significant was the testimony from Rafael Diaz, who had been driving approximately 5 miles behind Walters. Around 10:45, I saw what looked like a lightning strike in the distance, off to the west of the highway, Diaz stated. But it wasn't normal lightning. It was a perfect vertical column of light that lasted maybe 3 seconds. No thunder followed it. I've lived in Arizona my whole life and never seen anything like it. When I passed the Coyote Pass turnoff a few minutes later, I had this weird feeling, like a pressure in my head, pushing me to turn off the highway. It was strong enough that I actually gripped my steering wheel tighter and turned up my radio to distract myself. The investigation expanded to consider Walter's personal background and mental state prior to his disappearance. Interviews with family members, colleagues, and medical professionals revealed no concerning patterns. Walters had no history of mental health issues, substance abuse, or financial problems. He was divorced, but maintained an amicable relationship with his ex-wife, had good relationships with his colleagues, and had recently received a performance bonus from Southwestern. There were no indications of personal distress or intentions to disappear. His sister, Catherine Walters, provided investigators with information that added context to the case. 3 weeks before he disappeared, Ethan called me sounding genuinely puzzled, she told detectives. He said that twice now, while driving the same stretch of US 93 at night, he'd seen what looked like a large structure in the distance where he knew nothing existed. He described it as geometric, almost crystalline, and said it seemed to emit its own light. He was a practical person, not given to exaggeration or flights of fancy, so I know something unusual had caught his attention. He told me he was going to bring his personal camera on his next run to try and document it. This personal camera was not among the items recovered from Walter's truck, nor was it found during the extensive search of the surrounding area. The search for Ethan Walters continued for 4 weeks before being scaled back to periodic patrols and investigative follow-ups. During this period, only one additional piece of evidence emerged. Approximately 2 months after his disappearance, a group of hikers discovered Walters' Southwestern Freight Systems cap on a rocky ledge nearly 400 feet above the valley floor and almost 3 miles from where his truck had been abandoned. The cap showed no weathering or exposure damage, despite having been outdoors in the harsh desert environment for weeks. More puzzling was the discovery that the metal company insignia on the cap had been partially melted, requiring temperatures in excess of 1,000 degrees. Yet the fabric surrounding it showed no heat damage. The case remains officially classified as an open missing persons investigation. Southwestern Freight Systems has since implemented a policy prohibiting drivers from deviating from established routes while traveling through this section of Arizona without direct authorization from dispatch. They also upgraded their fleet with enhanced communication systems featuring redundant backup channels. Walter's truck underwent thorough examination by mechanical engineers, electrical specialists, and forensic technicians before being returned to service. Despite no structural or mechanical issues being identified, 2 subsequent drivers reported experiencing unusual electrical malfunctions and unexplained cold spots in the cab while operating the vehicle along the same route. Southwestern eventually reassigned the truck to routes that didn't include the US 93 corridor, where Walters had disappeared. The stretch of highway near Coyote Pass Road has developed an unsettling reputation among transportation workers. Many truckers refuse assignments that would require traveling this section after dark, and those who do often report driving well above the speed limit through the area, regardless of company policies or fuel efficiency considerations. Dr. Helena Morrison, a geophysicist who consulted on the case, offered a thought-provoking assessment. The electromagnetic anomalies recorded by the truck's systems, combined with the visual phenomena reported by multiple witnesses and the inexplicable temperature fluctuations, suggest localized disturbances in the normal physical properties of that specific geographic area. While I hesitate to speculate beyond the empirical data, these patterns bear striking similarities to theoretical models of what we might expect to observe during momentary intersections of different spatial domains. For the Walters family, the lack of closure remains the most difficult aspect. Catherine Walters continues to advocate for the investigation. maintaining a website dedicated to her brother's disappearance and the unusual circumstances surrounding it. The authorities initially treated this as a case of a driver becoming disoriented and lost in the desert, she stated in a recent interview. But the evidence points to something far more complex. Ethan was methodical and rational. He wouldn't have left his truck to wander into the desert without compelling reason. Whatever he saw that night was real enough to draw him away from safety, and the electronic evidence confirms something extraordinary occurred in those crucial minutes. The disappearance of Ethan Walters stands as one of the most thoroughly documented, yet completely unexplained cases in recent transportation history. For those who travel America's desert highways during the late hours, particularly through the isolated stretches of the American Southwest, it serves as a sobering reminder of the unexplained phenomena that occasionally manifest in these vast, empty spaces where the boundaries between the known and unknown may be thinner than we care to acknowledge. On December 5, 2022, veteran truck driver Lisa Harmon departed from a distribution center in Laramie, Wyoming, transporting a shipment of consumer electronics bound for Portland, Oregon. The 47-year-old driver had been with Mountain States Logistics for 14 years, maintaining an exceptional safety record throughout her tenure. Her planned route would take her northwest along Interstate 80 before connecting to Interstate 84 through Idaho and Oregon, a journey she had completed numerous times in her career. According to Mountain States' tracking system, Harmon's journey proceeded routinely throughout the day. She made her scheduled check-ins with dispatch, reporting good road conditions despite light snow beginning to fall as she approached the Utah border. Her final standard communication occurred at 7:58 p.m. as she passed through Echo Canyon in northeastern Utah, where she confirmed her intention to continue to the Tremonton Rest Area for her mandatory break period. At 8:37 p.m., Mountain States' monitoring system registered an unexpected change in Harmon's driving pattern. Her truck, which had been maintaining a steady speed of 58 mph in accordance with company policies for winter conditions, suddenly decelerated and pulled onto the shoulder of Interstate 84 near mile marker 178, a particularly isolated stretch of highway cutting through Echo Canyon. This unscheduled stop automatically triggered an alert in the company's operations center. When dispatch attempted to contact Harmon for clarification, they received no response through any communication channel, neither the truck's integrated system, her company-issued mobile phone, nor CB radio. Following established protocol for unexpected stops without communication, Operations Manager Thomas Reed contacted the Utah Highway Patrol at 8:52 p.m., requesting an emergency welfare check. Trooper Melissa Sanchez arrived at the location at 9:24 p.m., discovering a scene that would become the focus of one of Utah's most perplexing missing persons investigations. Harmon's truck was found properly positioned on the highway shoulder, with hazard lights activated and engine still running. The doors were locked, and through the windows, Trooper Sanchez observed no signs of disturbance inside the cab. After gaining entry using emergency override procedures, she documented a scene that defied conventional explanation. Harmon's personal belongings, including her wallet containing identification and $205 in cash, company-issued mobile phone, and insulated coffee mug, still half full and warm, remained in the cab. Her logbook lay open on the passenger seat with a final entry at 8:36 p.m. that simply read, "Echo response in Canyon, stopping to investigate." The truck's keys were still in the ignition. The most puzzling aspect of the scene was the condition of the truck's windshield. Though structurally intact, the interior surface displayed a pattern of condensation that forensic specialists would later describe as consistent with the formation of sound waves. This unusual pattern formed perfect concentric circles, emanating from a central point on the driver's side of the glass. More disturbing was the discovery that all electronic devices in the cab, including the mobile phone, dash camera, and the truck's communication system, had been completely drained of power, despite being fully functional and charged earlier in the journey. The dash camera, which company policy required to be operational at all times, contained footage that ended abruptly at 8:34 p.m., 3 minutes before the truck came to a stop. The final frames showed normal highway driving through Echo Canyon, but the audio portion captured something unusual, a faint, rhythmic sound that gradually increased in volume until it became a distinct pattern that audio specialists would later describe as similar to a human voice, but distorted, as if reflected multiple times. Outside the vehicle, Trooper Sanchez discovered a single set of footprints leading from the driver's side door toward the Rocky Canyon wall, approximately 50 yards from the highway. The prints, later confirmed to match Harmon's boot size, proceeded in a straight line toward the canyon before disappearing at the base of a sheer rock face. Despite the fresh snow that should have preserved any tracks, there was no indication of the prints continuing, returning to the vehicle, or being obscured by external factors. The search for Lisa Harmon began immediately, with additional officers arriving within the hour. By morning, a comprehensive operation was underway, utilizing K-9 units, helicopter surveillance with thermal imaging capability, and specialized mountain rescue teams. The search focused on the canyon walls and surrounding wilderness, covering over 3 square miles of terrain, but yielded no additional evidence of Harmon's presence or movement in the area. The investigation took an unusual turn when forensic technicians examined data from the truck's onboard computer system. Beginning at approximately 8:30 p.m., the system had recorded a series of anomalous readings, including rapid fluctuations in barometric pressure, electromagnetic interference affecting all electronic systems, and most notably, audio frequencies in the cab that cycled through a specific pattern every 7.3 seconds. Engineering specialists from the truck manufacturer confirmed that these readings fell well outside normal operating parameters and could not be attributed to any known mechanical or environmental cause. Investigators interviewed other drivers who had been traveling through Echo Canyon that evening. 5 separate witnesses reported unusual experiences in the vicinity where Harmon had stopped. James Rodriguez, driving approximately 15 minutes ahead of Harmon, stated that his radio had picked up unusual interference around 8:20 p.m. It started as static, but then developed into something that sounded like a voice echoing. At first, I thought it was another driver's transmission, bouncing off the canyon walls, but it had a strange quality, like the same few words repeated over and over, but I couldn't make out what they were saying. After about a minute, my radio went completely dead and didn't function again until I was clear of the canyon. Another witness, Sarah Chen, reported passing the same location at approximately 8:40 p.m. and observing what she described as a column of mist or vapor rising from the base of the canyon wall, where Harmon's footprints were later discovered. It wasn't like normal fog or exhaust, Chen explained. It had definition, almost like it was moving with purpose. What struck me most was how it remained perfectly vertical, despite the wind that was blowing through the canyon that night. Perhaps most significant was the testimony from Michael Tanner, who had been driving approximately 3 miles behind Harmon. Around 8:35, my truck's electrical system went haywire, Tanner stated. Lights dimming, gauges jumping, radio cycling through frequencies on its own. Then I heard a voice through my speakers, even though my radio was turned off. It sounded like a woman's voice, saying the same phrase repeatedly, but with an echo effect that made it hard to understand. The best I can describe it is something like, return to the source, or respond to the call, but I couldn't be certain. This continued for maybe 30 seconds. Then everything returned to normal. When I reached that stretch of canyon a few minutes later, I felt an overwhelming urge to pull over at exactly the same spot where the truck was found. The feeling was so strong that I actually had to grip my steering wheel tighter and focus on the road ahead. The investigation expanded to examine Harmon's personal background and mental state prior to her disappearance. Interviews with family members, colleagues, and medical professionals revealed no concerning patterns. Harmon had no history of mental health issues, substance abuse, or financial problems. She was described as happily married, with 2 teenage children, financially stable, and professionally satisfied. There were no indications of personal distress or intentions to disappear. Her husband, Robert Harmon, provided investigators with information that added context to the case. About 3 weeks before she disappeared, Lisa mentioned something strange that happened during her run through Echo Canyon, he told detectives. She said that twice now, while driving through that same stretch at night, she'd heard what she described as her own voice calling to her through the radio, even when it was turned off. She said it was probably just fatigue playing tricks on her mind, but it bothered her enough that she'd requested daytime routes when possible. The night she disappeared was the first time she'd been through Echo Canyon after dark since those experiences. Robert also revealed that his wife had begun recording her impressions of these experiences in a personal journal, which was not among the items recovered from her truck. She was a methodical person, he explained. She wanted to document the exact time and location of these occurrences to see if there was a pattern. She mentioned that the experiences always happened within the same quarter-mile stretch of highway. The search for Lisa Harmon continued for 3 weeks before being scaled back to periodic patrols and investigative follow-ups. During this period, only one additional piece of evidence emerged. 2 months after her disappearance, a highway maintenance worker discovered Harmon's Mountain States Logistics Identification Badge wedged in a narrow crevice in the canyon wall, approximately 30 feet above ground level and directly in line with where her footprints had ended. The badge showed no weathering or environmental damage despite weeks of exposure to harsh winter conditions. Forensic analysis revealed that the magnetic strip on the back had been completely demagnetized, and the plastic laminate contained microscopic fracture patterns consistent with exposure to high-frequency sound waves. The case remains officially classified as an open missing persons investigation. Mountain States Logistics has implemented a policy requiring drivers to travel in pairs through Echo Canyon, particularly during evening hours. The company also upgraded their fleet with enhanced communication systems featuring electromagnetic shielding and backup power sources that operate on independent circuits. Harmon's truck underwent extensive examination by mechanical engineers, acoustic specialists, and forensic technicians before being returned to service. Despite no structural or mechanical issues being identified, 3 different drivers subsequently reported experiencing unusual audio phenomena and electrical malfunctions while operating the vehicle through the same stretch of Echo Canyon. Mountain States eventually reassigned the truck to routes that didn't include Interstate 84 through northeastern Utah. The section of highway where Harmon disappeared has developed an unsettling reputation among transportation workers. Many truckers refuse assignments that would require traveling through Echo Canyon after sunset, and those who do often report driving with their radios and communication systems completely powered down when passing through that specific stretch of road. Dr. Eleanor Richards, an acoustic engineer who consulted on the case, offered a thought-provoking assessment. The audio phenomena, recorded by multiple witnesses, combined with the physical evidence of sound wave patterns on the windshield and the electromagnetic anomalies, suggest the presence of highly unusual acoustic properties within that specific segment of Echo Canyon. The mathematical regularity of the frequencies detected in the truck's cab indicates these were not random environmental sounds, but rather precisely structured audio patterns that bear similarity to certain harmonics of human speech, but at frequencies and amplitudes that shouldn't naturally occur in that environment. For the Harmon family, the lack of closure remains devastating. Robert Harmon continues to advocate for the investigation, maintaining a website dedicated to his wife's disappearance and the unusual circumstances surrounding it. The authorities treated this initially as a case of a driver becoming disoriented and wandering off, he stated in a recent interview. But the evidence points to something far more complex. Lisa was experienced, level-headed, and intimately familiar with that route. Whatever drew her from her truck that night was compelling enough to make her abandon all safety protocols she'd followed meticulously for 14 years. We believe the answer lies in understanding what caused those audio phenomena that multiple drivers have now reported experiencing in exactly the same location. The disappearance of Lisa Harmon stands as one of the most thoroughly documented yet completely unexplained cases in modern transportation history. For those who travel America's highways through the deep canyons of the West, particularly during the isolated hours of darkness, it serves as a sobering reminder of the unexplained phenomena that occasionally manifest in places where sound and silence interact in ways science has yet to fully comprehend.